This is English for Real People, a journey into clear, authentic English, explained slowly, calmly, and with purpose, where every episode brings you closer to understanding the language in its natural form. Welcome.
Picture this. You're sitting in a crowded cafe,
Yeah.
maybe you're traveling abroad, or perhaps you're just logging into a really high-stakes video call for work.
Oh, yeah, we've all been there.
Right. The conversation is flowing, and someone asks you a direct question in English, and you actually know the answer. In fact, your thoughts are perfectly clear in your head.
You can practically see the idea floating right there in front of you.
Exactly. It's fully formed. But then, you open your mouth to respond, and nothing happens. It is that terrifying, paralyzing moment where your brain is screaming the answer, but your mouth simply will not move.
It's an incredibly isolating feeling, and yet, it's a deeply universal experience for anyone trying to master a second language. You just feel like the internal machinery suddenly, without warning, broke down.
Yeah, it's like the Wi-Fi disconnected right at the crucial second of a download.
Mm.
So today we are going on a deep dive into some fascinating source material. It's a comprehensive guide completely dedicated to the mechanics of achieving English fluency. And our mission for this deep dive is to figure out exactly why that dreaded freeze happens to you and, more importantly, how to break the habit of mental translation so you can actually start thinking directly in English.
And right off the bat, I think we need to establish some crucial context about what is actually happening in your head during that freeze.
Because the natural instinct is almost always to blame yourself.
Right, totally. You sit there thinking, I just don't know enough vocabulary, or I didn't memorize enough grammar rules.
I should have studied more.
Exactly. But what the sources reveal is that this is rarely a vocabulary issue. It's actually a structural issue in the brain.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we aren't just looking at a list of words today. We are going to look under the hood at the actual biological mechanics of thought and speech.
So the problem isn't a lack of studying. We're just using the wrong machinery for the job.
Precisely.
To fix it, we first need to diagnose why that freeze happens in the first place. And from what I read, it really comes down to how our brain handles information and its obsession with efficiency.
Yeah, the fundamental thing to understand about the human brain is that it wants to conserve energy at all costs. It relies on the neural pathways that are the most heavily paved.
Right.
So when you are learning a new language, your brain naturally tries to use the roads it already knows best. And that reliance leads to a massive trap.
The four-step translation process.
Exactly. It locks learners into the strict four-step process that the source material identifies.
And this is something almost everyone defaults to without even realizing they are doing it. So let's walk through those 4 steps, so we can see where the breakdown actually happened.
Okay, so step 1 is the raw thought. This is an abstract, pre-verbal concept in your mind. You know what you want to communicate, but there are no words attached to it yet.
Okay, got it.
Step 2, your brain immediately forms that thought into a sentence in your native language, simply because that is the path of least resistance.
Makes sense.
Then step 3, you mentally translate that native language sentence into English. And finally, step 4, you speak. So it goes thought, native language, translation, speech.
Wait, looking at those steps, step 2 is just completely unnecessary.
It really is.
Okay, let's unpack this. It's like a traffic jam at a toll booth.
I like that.
Your ideas are moving fast on the highway at step 1, but forcing every single thought to stop and pay a native language toll creates a massive honking backup.
That backup is the literal definition of the mental bottleneck the sources discuss. The critical point of failure in real-time communication happens entirely between step 2 and step 3.
The translation phase.
Yes. When you are sitting alone at a desk writing an email, you have the luxury of time. You can pay the toll, you can search your memory for the right word.
Right, but in a live conversation, the cognitive load is just simply too high.
Way too high, because by the time you've translated the first half of your sentence, the other person has already finished their thought.
Oh yeah, the conversation has moved on.
And you're left holding half a translated sentence that is no longer relevant.
Which triggers panic, and then you freeze.
Exactly. So the ultimate goal of fluency isn't to get faster at paying the toll, it's to demolish the toll booth completely.
Bypassing it entirely.
Right. The objective is to go from step 1, the raw thought, straight to speaking in English.
But, demolishing the toll booth implies rewiring how we think. How do you actually train an adult brain, which has relied on its native language for decades, to just bypass it entirely?
Well, this brings us to a foundational concept in the sources, which is the sensory anchor method.
The sensory anchor maths.
Yeah. The reality is our brains learn languages exponentially faster when the new information is directly connected to the physical body and to our senses.
Rather than just being connected to a linguistic definition.
Exactly.
Connects it to the physical body.
Yeah.
Okay, let's ground that. Give me an example of how that works in practice when someone is trying to learn new vocabulary.
Let's use a very specific example from the text. Imagine a hot cup of coffee. The traditional bottleneck way to learn this is purely linguistic. You see the hot cup, your brain thinks taza caliente, using Spanish as an example here, and then you search your mental dictionary to translate taza caliente into hot cup.
Right, so your native language is acting as the bridge. You're paying the toll.
But with the sensory anchor method, you bypass the words completely. Instead of connecting the English words hot cup to the Spanish words taza caliente, you connect the English words directly to the physical sensation.
Oh, interesting.
You feel the heat radiating against your fingers, you smell the roasted coffee, you see the steam rising in the air, you wire the phrase hot cup to the sensory reality of the object itself.
Okay, I see how that works for a tangible object. I pick up a hot cup, I feel the burn on my hand, I smell the coffee, and I lock in the words hot cup.
Exactly.
But I have to push back on this a little bit.
Sure, go ahead.
A conversation is way more complicated than just pointing at a hot cup.
Yeah.
Let's say I'm in a project update meeting, and I need to explain a complex software feature or like a delay in a supply chain. How does smelling coffee help my brain bypass my native language when I'm dealing with abstract professional concepts?
That is the core challenge most learners face when they first hear about sensory learning. But what's fascinating here is that the key lies in understanding human evolution.
Evolution. How so?
Well, our brains were wired to react instantly to physical threats or rewards, like the heat of a fire, the sight of a predator, the spatial awareness of our surroundings, millions of years before we invented grammar or syntax.
Okay, yeah.
Sensory processing happens in the deeper, older, and vastly faster parts of the brain. The limbic system operates in milliseconds, so when you tie English to those sensory networks, you're essentially hijacking an ancient survival mechanism for speed.
Wait, really? So you're saying we can use those ancient, fast neural pathways even for abstract business concepts?
Absolutely. Because even abstract concepts have a sensory or physical footprint in your body.
Give me an example of that.
Think about the feeling of being frustrated by a delay. You don't just think the word frustration, right? You feel a tightness in your chest or a heat in your face.
Oh, I definitely feel the heat in my face.
Right. If you tie the English word frustrated to that physical sensation in your chest rather than to your native word for the emotion, the English word surfaces automatically the next time you feel that tightness.
Oh, wow.
Or take a timeline. You can anchor it spatially. You visualize a line moving from your left to your right. You attach the English vocabulary to that visual spatial map in your mind.
So the experience itself becomes the bridge. You are physically feeling or visualizing your way into the vocabulary rather than looking it up in a mental dictionary.
Yes. And because you are biologically wiring the language to a physical reality, the speed of retrieval is instantaneous. The body remembers it faster than the linguistic center does.
Which eliminates the need for the native language entirely.
Exactly. And once you start anchoring these words and bypassing the translation tool booth, your brain frees up a massive amount of cognitive energy.
That makes so much sense.
But as the sources point out, having the vocabulary ready is really only half the battle. You still have to get the words out of your mouth. And this is where learners tend to sabotage themselves all over again.
Because they finally have the words, so they try to rush them out.
Yes.
The sources mention a pervasive misconception about what fluency actually looks and sounds like. There is this deeply ingrained belief that fluency equals speaking incredibly fast.
It is a trap almost every learner falls into. They assume that native speakers produce an unbroken, rapid-fire stream of words.
Right.
And they think that any pause is a sign of weakness or a lack of proficiency.
People think to sound like a native speaker, you need to sound like an auctioneer.
Yeah.
Just rattling off syllables without ever coming up for air.
But if you actually observe native speakers or analyze transcripts of natural conversation, that isn't what they do at all. Native speakers use what the sources call micropauses constantly.
Micropauses.
Yeah, they pause between phrases, they stretch out certain vowel sounds, they use filler words while they formulate their next thought.
Like little fractions of a second where the speech just naturally hangs in the air.
Exactly. But learners often mistake these small pauses as errors or signs of hesitation, so they try to eradicate them from their own speech.
They try to power through.
They do. But these micropauses are not mistakes. They are the natural rhythm of the language. And crucially, from a biological standpoint, pausing allows you to do something absolutely vital.
What's that?
It allows you to breathe.
Oh. Here's where it gets really interesting. It's like music.
How do you mean?
Well, fluency is actually about the rhythm and the spaces between the notes, not just playing the notes as fast as humanly possible.
That's a great way to look at it.
Right. If a musician played a piece at double speed with no rests, it wouldn't sound fluent. It would sound chaotic. It would sound frantic.
And frantic is exactly what is happening inside the learner's body. The biology of what happens when you don't pause is profound.
What happens?
When you try to speak as fast as possible to prove you are fluent, your breathing becomes shallow. You start chest breathing, or you hold your breath entirely.
Because you're racing to the end of the sentence before you run out of air.
Exactly. And when your body detects that shallow breathing and a lack of steady oxygen, the amygdala triggers a threat response. Your nervous system assumes you are in physical danger.
Wait, really? From just talking fast?
Yes. As a result, your cortisol levels, the primary stress hormone, shoot up. And high cortisol physically impedes the hippocampus, which is the part of your brain responsible for memory retrieval.
Oh, wow. So it literally shuts down your access to your vocabulary.
It completely shuts it down.
So the panic isn't a result of forgetting the word. The panic is actually the physiological cause of forgetting the word. That completely flips how we usually think about speaking anxiety.
It's a biological chain reaction. Dropping your cortisol by breathing steadily during those micropauses is what prevents that stress-induced brain freeze.
Because you're calming the nervous system.
Right. When you allow yourself to pause, you tell your nervous system, we are safe. The cortisol drops, the neural pathways open back up, and the words you anchored earlier can flow freely.
So the rhythm isn't just an aesthetic choice to sound more natural. It is a physiological necessity to keep your brain functioning.
Exactly.
Okay, so breathing lowers the cortisol, and that keeps the memory centers open. But I have to ask, pausing just to breathe feels a bit like treating the symptom, not the disease.
What do you mean?
Well, if I'm taking a micropause, I'm still trying to figure out what to say next. What is my brain actually supposed to be doing in that micropause so I don't just freeze up again when the pause is over?
That is the final piece of the puzzle. During those pauses, the brain needs to shift how it constructs language. The sources explain that most learners try to build sentences word by word.
Right. It's a very linear, mechanical process.
Yeah.
You think subject, then verb, then adjective, then object.
Yes.
It's like laying down train tracks right in front of a moving train. You're desperately throwing down one plank at a time, hoping you don't derail.
And it is exhausting. It takes massive amounts of working memory, and it is highly prone to errors. If you forget one single word in that linear chain, the whole sentence crashes.
And you're back to freezing.
Exactly. So what you should be doing during those micropauses is something called conceptual mapping.
Conceptual mapping. Okay, so what does this all mean? Let's walk through a real-world scenario to see the difference between the train tracks and the map.
All right, imagine you are back in that high-stakes meeting, and you need to explain why a project is delayed.
Okay.
The linear, word-by-word learner tries to construct a perfect, rigid sentence. They think, the server migration failed due to a bandwidth bottleneck.
That's a mouthful.
It is. In the micropause, their brain is frantically searching for the exact translation of migration, then failed, then due to.
And if they forget the word bandwidth, they completely freeze. The train derails.
But with conceptual mapping, you don't look at your sentence as a string of individual words. You imagine your conversation as a map.
So you have a starting point and a destination.
Yes. The destination is the broader concept you want to communicate. When you take a micropause, you aren't trying to figure out the next specific word. You are just looking at the next landmark on your map.
So for that meeting, the landmarks are just the broad concepts, like server problem, not enough space, project late.
Yes. You aren't laying bricks one by one anymore to build a perfect wall. You're just navigating from one idea to the next.
Well, I love that.
You let the sensory anchors you build earlier surface naturally, and you use the rhythm to fill in the gaps. You might say, we had a problem with the server. The space was too small, so we are delayed.
It communicates the exact same concept, But it doesn't require that rigid, fragile memorization.
Exactly. You are trusting the networks you've built. It means shifting your focus away from grammatical perfection and toward actual communication.
The sources refer to this transition as the natural fluency shift.
They do. It is the defining moment you stop constructing sentences mechanically, piece by piece, and start generating them holistically based on concepts.
It's the difference between reciting a memorized script and actually having a living, breathing conversation.
That's spot on.
I mean, if you make a mistake on a script, you're lost. If you take a wrong turn on a map, you just find another route to the landmark.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this shift is how you permanently move from being a mechanical translator, someone who is just doing rapid mental math, into a natural communicator.
You stop managing the language
Yeah.
and you start actually using it to express yourself.
Exactly.
Wow. We have covered so much ground today, and it really completely changes the paradigm of language learning.
It really does.
We started out looking at the terrifying freezing moment in the cafe, and we discovered that achieving fluency is actually so much deeper than just grinding through grammar drills or, memorizing flashcards. It's entirely about changing your internal process.
By understanding that the native language toll booth is what causes the mental bottleneck, you realize that you simply don't need to translate anymore. You can use sensory anchors to hijack your ancient, fast neural pathways, connecting English directly to your physical reality and your spatial awareness.
And then, instead of rushing to prove you are fluent, you embrace the natural rhythm. You use micro-pauses to keep your breathing steady, which keeps your cortisol down and your memory centers wide open.
And in those pauses, you aren't laying train tracks word by word. You are mapping concepts. You are stepping out of the textbook and into your actual life.
It is such an empowering framework because it works with your biology instead of against it.
It really takes the blame away from the learner and provides a mechanical, biological solution. And, it leaves us with a fascinating, broader implication to consider.
Ooh, what's that?
Well, if our brains can become exponentially more efficient at something as incredibly difficult as speaking a new language just by bypassing the translation toll booth and connecting to our physical senses and natural rhythm, it makes you wonder.
Yeah.
What other complex skills in your life are you currently bottlenecking by over-intellectualizing them instead of just feeling your way through?
Oh, wow. That is definitely something to chew on. Think about that next time you're at that dinner party or logging into that video call. When that moment comes and you feel the freeze creeping up, don't panic.
Just breathe.
Don't force the translation. Just feel the physical anchor. Take a breath to drop your cortisol, find your rhythm,
Yeah.
and let the music play.